and welcome back to F1 for Dummies. I'm Jami, and I am here alone today. Some of our recordings got corrupted and stuff, and so I wanted to make sure I got this episode of F1 for Dummies out before the start of the Melbourne Grand Prix. So Olivia cannot be here because of the time constraint. I'm literally recording this everything happens a day before for me because I live in America. So like Thursday night is when practice happens for me, but usually it's a Friday morning, and you'll learn that in this episode. So I wanted to get this out there before that all starts because that's the start of the F1 season, and you need to know things if you want to get into it. So today, kind of like I said, we're going to talk about an F1 race weekend. So usually, more often than not, a race weekend will kind of start on a Thursday. And then for one exception, Las Vegas, it starts on a Wednesday. And on these Thursdays, really, there's no on-track racing. There's no driving the cars at all. It is just media day for the teams, for the drivers. This is where they're recording all of their TikToks, all of their posts, everything like that. There's also 2 press conferences. It consists of 3 random drivers, sometimes not so random, and they're just kind of asking about this race weekend, what their plans are, and also last race weekend, what they felt and everything like that. And by it's random, sometimes there's a drama the week before, or it's like a home race and you'll see the home driver in the press conference. So it's not always random, but more often than not it will be. And one sec. I don't like where my ring light is. It's like in my eyes. There we go. We'll just have a little shadow. And obviously some things for fans, a lot of fans like rating the drivers' outfits going into the Thursday. They're usually not wearing their team gear on Thursdays, so they're a little styled up a little bit more. You probably already saw that if you're watching this later on. But then we have Friday. This is where we start having cars on track. So it starts off with free practice 1, or as most people call it, FP1. Just like any other sport, the drivers need to practice driving on the track. The teams will also test out different car configurations during practices, and drivers will test out different racing lines, and they'll also test out all the different tires to kind of see what tires is the best for that specific track based off of the ones they were given. Sometimes the medium tire is better than the soft. There's things like that, and like there's different configuration of the wings, of everything in the car that they might be testing out in the drivers with their different racing lines depending on how the car feels and how the car turns and all of that. And so that will be tested out in all of the practices. Also on Friday there is free practice 2, FB2. Very similar things, more practice time. The teams will kind of settle into their configurations. You'll maybe see a couple qualifying laps, so like the faster laps, but otherwise they're still testing things out by free practice 2. And so there's that. And then Saturday, sorry, I almost forgot. Sprint weekends is different. Sprint weekends have a sprint race in it, so they change the entire weekend entirely, so there's different things. So for Friday sprint weekends, you still have that free practice 1, but instead of free practice 2, you have the sprint qualifying or shootout. And so this is I'll tell you about qualifying a little bit. So qualifying is a 1-lap race between all of the drivers. They're trying to get the fastest 1-lap pace, and it sets up where they are in the grid when they start the race the next day. And so we have sprint qualifying 1, which is a 12-minute session of all 22 cars going out on track and trying to get the fastest time. The bottom 6 cars will not make it to the next round, and their placements will be placed. So if you get 18th, say, in this, you're stuck 18th on the grid starting the next day in the race. And then we go into sprint qualifying 2, it's now 10 minutes, so even faster. Like, you got to get your laps in. You got to hope nothing goes wrong and you're able to get that lap in. And then the next six, bottom six, will also set their time. So, like, I was about to, I think, wait, like 12th. 12th is a good one where I know it's for sure in that. So if you run, you are the 12th slowest, I guess, in SQ2, then you are 12th on the grid the next day. And lastly, we go into sprint qualifying 3, which is the top 10, the biggest shootout, 8 minutes. And for sprint qualifying, then mediums have to be used for those 2 sessions. So whatever the medium tire is for the weekend has to be used. And then the softs for the last. And most of the time they only have enough time to have one fast lap because they have to go out, warm up their tires first, fast lap, and then slow down, like, to cool it off. So that's kind of, if we're calling it a fast lap and out lap, that means they're going their fastest at that lap. Because there'll be laps where they aren't going their fastest. And so, back to Saturday of a normal F1 weekend, we have free practice 3. Very similar to the other free practices, but this time they're going to be doing a lot more of those sprint laps where they're not sprint laps, oh my god, qualifying laps where they're going out, going really fast. They're trying to see where they're at compared to the rest of the grid, kind of getting the feel of it, practicing qualifying so they can get that good qualifying. And, you'll see a lot of the soft tires being used because something about the tires, they have to use every single tire in a race weekend at some form or shape. So a lot of the hard tires, they'll maybe save 1 or 2 hard tires for a race if they think that's needed for the strategy, but also a lot of the hard tires are going to be used during practice time because they don't need it for a race. And so depending on what the strategy is for the weekend, usually they figure it out after Friday. They'll figure out what tires need to be used and what tires need to be saved just so they can do well in the race. I feel like I was going to say something else, but I'm forgetting and I don't have Olivia to bounce off of. And so next is qualifying. So similar to sprint qualifying, we have qualifying 1, but this time it's 18 minutes, so more time. Same thing of the bottom 6 being the ones that don't move on. Then you have Q2, which is 15 minutes, the bottom 6, and the top 10 go into Q3, which is 12 minutes. A lot of drivers will have enough time to do one flying lap, go back into the pits, readjust, do another flying lap. They just got a little bit more time for this. For a sprint weekend, instead of having either of these, well, qualifying is still the same, that is still stayed there, but instead of free practice 3, they have the sprint race. And the sprint race consists of 100 kilometers, or about 1/3 of the laps compared to the Grand Prix for the weekend. And so there's no mandatory pit stops. Usually they go one tire the entire time, and only the top 8 score, and first only scores 8 points. So it's a little less serious than the actual race. Sprint races are meant to be used to try to get new fans to watch so they don't have to watch a full 3-hour race. It's a really short, hour-long, thing to watch, so that's fine. I just remember what I wanted to talk about more. When it comes to the tires and all of the tires needing to be used, 2 types of tires don't need to be used up, and that is the wet tires and the intermediate tires. And so those tires, they don't need to be used up unless it's raining or stuff and they need to use it because the track is wet, but otherwise they don't need to use it up in a race weekend like the other tires they need to. So those are just the differences. I'll explain more about tires in a sec. I know that's later on. And so Sunday is race day. We have the Grand Prix on Sunday. It's the most anticipated day. It's the most people watch. All this stuff before you don't need to watch to be a fan. Like, I wouldn't consider someone who doesn't watch the practices, doesn't watch qualifying, to not be a fan. You don't even need to watch all the races to be a fan. Like, you can be a casual fan and watch races every once in a while. You don't need to be watching everything. I watch everything because I like having things in the background, so I have the practices in the background. I also use the practices as kind of the predict. I use it to help predict things. And also, we have a podcast, and we talk about the race weekend, in the entire race weekend, not just the Grand Prix in the podcast. So I need to take notes. I need to see what's happening. I need to report if someone crashed, if someone spun out, like all of that. But otherwise, it's not really necessary to be a fan. But the Grand Prix is around 300 kilometers long of a race, consisting of a mandatory pit stop and different tire compounds needing to be used. You cannot go from a soft to a soft tire. You have to go from a soft to a medium, or a medium to a hard, or a soft to a hard. You have to change the tire compound, and you have to take at least one pit stop in the race. And so the race starts out, there's a formation lap, and then there is also, oh my god, whatever. Then there's the race start. And so the lights are on, so all six lights go on. One by one, they go out. And then once they're all out, that's the start of the race. It is a flat start. That's so funny. Instead of a rolling start like some other series, IndyCar has a rolling start, NASCAR has a rolling start, a lot of other series have rolling starts, but F1 is a flat start. This year, there's another special thing. There's going to be a blue light on the side before the lights turn on, telling the drivers that they can get up to the max RPM that they need to start the car due to the new types of engines and the inability to get the car to the right RPM in enough time to be able to actually start it. We're going to see how that goes at Melbourne. There was still some finicky things during testing that it might change a little bit. Teams might change some stuff up. And things that can happen during the race. The race isn't just a race. There's a lot of strategy involved. There's things that happen on track. There's penalties. And so let's get into the penalties. So if the driver does something that they're not supposed to, it's not in the rule book, does something illegal, they can get a 5-second, 10-second penalty, or a grid penalty, drive-through, or disqualification penalty. So 5-second penalty is either you add 5 seconds to the end of your time during the race, or when you go into the pit for your mandatory pit stop, for 5 seconds, everyone has to keep their hands off the car before they can start changing tires and all that with the car. And you can serve your penalty that way. 10-second is the same thing, but just obviously longer. Grid place penalty usually will happen during like practices and qualifying. And so in qualifying or practices, if you get a 5-place grid penalty, then when you start the race, you are 5 places back from what you qualified. Sometimes you'll get a the drivers, I say you, like you guys are the drivers. You guys are the drivers, obviously. Sometimes the drivers will get a penalty during the race, a grid place penalty, and the next race they have to serve it. Usually we see something like 5, sometimes we've seen 10, maybe a 3. I don't know if I've seen a 3, and I don't know if that's a thing. Don't quote me on that. Drive-through penalties is the pit lane has a speed limiter, so you can only go a certain amount of speed. It changes for whatever track they're on, but you can only go a certain amount of speed in the pit lane, which is much, much slower than out on track. So it's just a penalty where you drive through the pit lane, as explained by drive-through. And then disqualification is obviously you are disqualified from the race. You don't get points if you scored points, all of that. some things you can do to get... Why do I keep saying you? Jesus Christ. Some things the drivers can do. I'm going to get better at this, guys. I'm going to get better. Some things the drivers can do to get these penalties is track limits. If you go off track too many times, going off track is considered when all 4 wheels are off track. So if you keep one on, you're fine. And then especially if you go off track and gain advantage. So if you go off track in 5th place and you get back on track in 3rd place, that is gaining an advantage. You need to give those places back because you went off track. That's illegal. Causing a collision. If you're the one that causes the accident with another car and it's not a racing incident where it just kind of happens. An unsafe release, which means if you're unsafely... Oh my, I did your again. If the driver is unsafely released into the race in whatever way, usually it's just into the pit lane, like where they almost hit another driver, because their team release them too early, or if the team's not ready to release the car and the driver goes before they're ready, and it's just to keep everyone safe. Similar thing is an unsafe rejoin. So if you go off track and you like spin out and you stop and you need to rejoin back onto the track, you need to make sure there's no other cars in your vicinity before going back. You need to wait for them. I said you again. The drivers need to wait. I give up. Ignoring flags. So if you ignore a red flag or a yellow flag, if you ignore any of the blue flag, that's another one. If you ignore them, you're going to get a penalty, because especially a red flag where the race has ended, they're ceasing the race, you need to stop. And then overtaking under the safety car. If the safety car is out or the virtual safety car is out, you cannot overtake the car in front of you. So if you do, that's a penalty. Jump starts. If you start too early, we've seen a couple of those last season. There was one from Oscar. There was one from Lando. I think Max. Don't quote me on that. DRS misuse. I think it's like boost mode or something. I really haven't figured out the new regulations when it comes to like all of the overtaking stuff. But DRS used to be a system where only the back wing would open, which allows you to go faster. We now have a new system where both the front and the back wing open up to allow you to go faster, and you're only allowed to use that at certain points, and you're only allowed to use it when you're 1 second behind the driver in front of you. It just allows for the drivers to overtake a little bit better. But if you do that when you're not supposed to, or you're gonna get a penalty from that. Abuse of officials. I haven't seen this one often enough. I think it's kind of like if you're mean to the officials, if you're mean to the FIA, if you swear at them, like all of this, that gets the drivers a penalty. Pit lane speeding. Go too fast in the pit lane when there's a limiter. An underweight car, because the lighter the car is, the faster they go. So this usually turns into a disqualification. Skid plank wear, which is the metal, what kind of metal is it? It's a fancy metal. Underneath the car, it's under the drivers. It's kind of just to keep the driver safe. And usually the wear is if the car is too low to the ground, it'll obviously hit the ground a lot. That's why you see sparks behind the cars. And it'll slowly wear over time. And even if you're 1 millimeter too short, you are going to get disqualified from it. And then engine/gearbox changes, you can only change those things a certain amount of times in the F1 season. And especially if you change it from qualifying to race day, you'll usually get a grid place penalty, or you have to start from the pit lane for that one. And now moving on, those are all of the penalties a driver can get. We are now moving on to the flags, which you've heard me kind of talk about some of them. Throughout the race and the race weekend, you'll see a multitude of different flags. There's so many that tell the drivers different things. It's just a safety. It's their way to get safety stuff. Nowadays, they're usually just digital screens that the drivers can see. They'll also see it on their screen in front of them on the steering wheel. And they'll have actual marshals waving flags also, especially at certain tracks where they're older tracks. But let's start off with the most common, a yellow flag. Some sort of track hazard has happened, debris, gravel, animal on track, water, person on track. It slows down the driving, usually in that specific section. Sometimes it can be multiple sections, but when it gets to be the whole track needs to be like slowed down, that's when you'll get a virtual safety car first. Virtual safety car is when the drivers have to go to a certain speed, but the gaps in between them will stay the same. So, like, Charles Leclerc is 1 second ahead of Lando Norris. That same gap will stay the same when there's a virtual safety car, because all it's doing is slowing down to a certain speed that the drivers have to go around the entire track. And a safety car is usually when there is a car on track that they're going to need some time to take it out, or the drivers need to drive a specific way to get around whatever hazard it is. And so a safety car will come out and lead the drivers around the track. Sometimes, like, a good example of this is when a driver crashes, like, after the pit lane, and they'll drive through the pit lane to go around it while the marshals and stuff are picking up the car and stuff like that. A safety car, you obviously slow down, but the gaps that are there that were once there during the race are gone. So you kind of bunch them, everyone gets bunched up really close together, kind of, you're supposed to stay together. So it does, and you have to be within a second apart. It aids in tire strategies too, because if you take a pit stop during either a virtual safety car or a safety car, it's not as time wasting as a normal pit stop during the race, because the drivers are going slower around the track, so you won't lose as much time through the pit stop. So if a driver pit stops right before a safety car, they are so unlucky, because that's all that time wasted. All of these other drivers get to save all that time that they just wasted. And so there's a lot of strategies with it. If you should pit under the safety car, it just depends on the race. It depends on the tire wear. It depends on what other drivers are doing around you. A red flag is whatever hazard is on track that the entire race needs to be stopped. And so all of the drivers will drive back into the pit lane. Everything's fully stopped. Red flags can be so bad that drivers will get out of their cars even. They still line up in the same order they were in when the red flag came up. But otherwise, usually we'll see this when it's too wet. I think a great example is Spa 2025. Oof. They had to, it was like an hour of a red flag. They did like 1 or 2 laps. They kept doing formation laps, and it just, the visibility was so bad. All of the drivers were like, I can't see. And it was just really dangerous, especially with Spa's history of being a dangerous track. So they took an hour before the actual race start. Green flag, just that starts the race again when there's a yellow flag or when there's a red flag. Like, just tells that everything's safe and you can go. Blue flag. So blue flag happens when there are faster drivers behind you, usually when they're about to lap you, coming in and about to lap you, and so you have to move over because you are impeding in their race. Once you're lapped, you can re-lap them, like, that's fine. And sometimes blue flag drivers will also get unlapped when there's a safety car. Depends. There's some controversy with that, especially Abu Dhabi 2021. If you know, you know. Checkered flag, obviously the end of the race. That's a typical racing thing. Most of these flags are typical across the board for racing. Yellow and red stripes means like the track is slippery. This isn't really talked about much, and by slippery it's usually like oils on the track or something like that rather than water or like gravel and stuff that make it slippery. Black with orange circle is the driver has mechanical issues, go back to the pit. Once again, does not happen very often. You don't really see this. Usually the engineer is telling the driver they have mechanical issues and to go back into the pit. Not usually a flag. Black and white flag is an unsportsmanlike behavior. I see this the most when it's an off tracks warning. So you can go off track 5 times before getting a penalty, and you'll get that warning on the 4th. So once you get a black and white flag, that's telling you, hey, don't do that again. And so because if you get a black flag, that means you're disqualified. And then white flag, once again, not seen a slow driver ahead or a miscellaneous vehicle. And by miscellaneous vehicle, it's usually going to be like safety car. Well, usually it doesn't happen. Like the cranes and stuff that pick up the cars off track, all of that. But yeah, that is an F1 race weekend. I don't know if you'll see everything this weekend. Who knows? I feel like you'll see a lot of fun stuff. Melbourne last year was a crazy race, and I think even Melbourne 2024, you never know what happens. Weather is a thing, and weather is very fun when it comes to races because it turns the tides very quickly. And yeah, it's new regulations. We don't know what's going to happen. I hope you guys liked this video. I know it was by myself today, but please ask any questions down below. I am here to answer them. And I will see you guys next time. Go follow our other socials. I have to get to class, so I can't do the whole spiel. Bye!